Hello, everyone, and welcome back. As always, I appreciate your time and your support. So, I just wanted to address a few more questions that people have been asking because, well, I've been talking about reasons that linger or remain to wonder if Bryan Kohberger did, in fact, commit the Idaho 4 murders alone. So, let's dive in. I want to address, first and foremost, that I don't think there was an accomplice. I don't. There could have been, however, and I don't know that there wasn't. That is why we are addressing the reasons why there are lingering questions surrounding if Kohberger did it alone or not. Many people pick at the timeline and the brutality of the overall attacks. I'm very careful not to doubt one's will. With that being said, I'm not going to say that one person couldn't do that in 13 minutes, or 9, or 4 at all. That's not my game, so we're going to avoid that. Instead, I want to talk about what I think happened and why the lingering questions matter. I believe Bryan Kohberger did this. I believe he did it alone. The different agencies that worked on this case may have varying opinions as to what it is exactly that Kohberger did, whilst still agreeing that he did in fact kill the Idaho 4 students, Madison Mogen, Kaylee Gonsalves, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. So, bearing that in mind, let's talk about what I think may have happened. Contrary to the belief of many, I do believe that Bryan Kohberger did in fact follow these girls on Instagram. Contrary to how I feel about certain things and people and parties, and I also believe that the Garrett Discovery based Instagram user account was in fact Bryan Kohberger's account. For those of you who have indulged in the Vicky Ward Patterson, slash the Patterson person book, you'll know that they also believe the same. And I'm going to say that they believe the Garrett Discovery document has the correct account as well, because, well, Vicky Ward herself has stated that the digital footprint of Bryan Kohberger indicated that he did in fact slide into the DMs of all 3 girls, Maddie, Xana, and Kaylee, and that he did in fact like all of Maddie's photos using that Instagram account, or an Instagram account, and that he did in fact like many of Kaylee's photos as well, standardly only the ones that Maddie was in. So, the Celebrate, you guys are going to argue with me about this. Some say Celebrate. I actually pronounce it the way that it should be pronounced. The Celebrate people said that Bryan Kohberger did not have any connection to these victims. So I'm going to assume that that's not where Vicky Ward and this Patterson person are getting their information from. I'm going to assume that they are extracting that from the Garrett Discovery document, and that that's what they're running with too. With that being said, all of that was very long-winded. With that being said, based on the fact that I also think that that was Bryan Kohberger's account, I think this started the day that he created hashtag 1112KED. I also have an unconfirmed theory that regardless of who he initially intended to enact these crimes against, that once it became these particular victims, his initial plan, 11/12, was thwarted because the night of 11/11, Veterans Day, USMC Bar Knife, that night was also the Pi Phi party, which rolled into the early morning hours of 11/12. So if I'm connecting dots properly here, there were victims chosen, albeit the ones that he ultimately slaughtered or otherwise. On whatever day he created hashtag 11/12 KED. If not, then on whatever day he created hashtag 11/12 KED, he at least knew what he was going to do. If not, who to, right? So, the Pennsylvania probable cause affidavit, 166 pages, details a lot. It encompasses basically, we believe that at some point between the very first day of school, August 21st, 2022, and November 12th, 2022, that he chose these students, and we don't know when. So we are looking for either a pivot to these students or the day that he actually just found these students and they became the initial targets. At some point in that time realm, either hashtag 11/12 KED was created and these targets were chosen, or that had already been created and he knew what he was going to do and was just waiting for people to return to school to choose targets. That might make sense, okay? So I think this starts like the day of planning this whole thing and putting things in motion on the whatever the plan looked like. I think that day is probably going to be whatever day that Instagram account created hashtag 11/12 KED. Now, since there were girls who reported that those were their photos, Dateline showed, from Bryan Kohberger's phone, and that the only place those photos were posted was on Instagram, whether he had an Instagram account or not, he was on Instagram looking at things. So far-fetched to say that he had an account? Probably not. So let's return to the probable cause affidavit. If you remember the little depiction of the U that he made returning home, law enforcement tried to basically like get rid of that B line that they created in blue that indicated the route he took directly to the girl's home from his campus. If you recall, Ann Taylor brought that up in court. She made a big deal about it and, more or less said that was implied that he had just, beeline straight for the house. But at the same time, that doesn't make any sense because the timeline doesn't match up. And if the magistrate had had a chance to know that they literally just put that there to mislead her, maybe she wouldn't have found probable cause. That was amongst her arguments for why the magistrate may not have found probable cause. Anyway, let's talk about that blue line. Ann Taylor's right. That blue line puts Bryan at these kids' house well before 3:29 a.m. That's why that's a problem. Because the man at the dumpster, his face was out, but you couldn't really make out anything. Okay? He didn't have a mask on. He doesn't have a white Elantra to tie him to. Bryan didn't have his phone on. So there's no way, without doing a lot of work to clean up that face on that camera, okay? There's no way to know for sure that that's Bryan because I can't tie him to the car. He's not in it. the phone is off. That's not going to fucking work. But technically, the defendant's attorney, well, the now convicted attorney, is right. If he took that beeline, like you say, directly to these girls' house, well, he would have been there in time to be the person at the dumpster at 3:15. So, using that against Dan Taylor and Bryan Kohberger, and the police, I guess, as well, I think that there was a lack of ability to prove that Bryan was the person at the dumpster. And that's why they didn't say that. But I do believe that they know he probably fucking was. And I think it was. Okay, so let's imagine that it was. Okay? Then does he take a foot lap around the house, knife in hand, intending to go in and realize they're still awake? So then he gets back in his car and he circles for a while. Okay, anyway. So 2:53-ish, we know the phone is off. Now, it may have gone off at 2:53. It may have gone off at 2:57. Whatever. We don't know. But 2:47, whatever. We don't know. But we know the phone is off. Okay, it's off. So, phone off. Right around the time that he would be returning to the crime scene, if and only if I'm right about this. Ready? He was already out there. So his plan had been thwarted on Veterans Night, 11/11, because of the Pi Phi party. So he comes back on 11/12 because 11/12 was his day. That was his date. He had already chosen it. His OCD said that had to be the fucking day. Okay. So he comes back that night and he's there a little earlier. And I'm only wondering this because while the 48 hours warrant for his cell phone was from November 12th to November 14th, from midnight to midnight. And, well, why the fuck don't we know what Bryan was doing on the 12th or on the 13th prior to 2:42 a.m.? I'm suspicious as fuck that there was some ongoings, okay, that they do know about that would have come out at trial stating that he was there. He was there, and unfortunately, at 10 o'clock, everybody dispersed, left out the house, and went out until around 1 a.m. Okay, so now I'm going to debate that he was there around 1-ish, though, because Dylan and Bethany seem to return, and he, has no idea that they're even there. Everyone who returned after Dylan and Bethany ends up deceased. Like he knew that they were all there. Like he was prepared for them to all be there. Like he watched them come back. Okay, so I'm making guesses on that one. But let's go back. The man in the woods. Remember, the dog likes to run off when the man is in the woods. Okay, so why would Maddie, at more than 3 times the legal alcohol limit, take the dog out? Let me go back. Bryan comes into the area when it's murder time, and he starts circling the house. Now, the commonality is that usually he parks behind Maddie's bedroom window there in the parking lot and just stares in when he comes this other, almost 30 times, okay? What we don't know is on those 30 times, did he also then go around that loop taking Walenta to be able to see in Kaylee's upper slider door as well, where you get a much better view of what's going on in Kaylee's room than you would ever get in Maddie's room through a smaller window, okay? We don't know that. So people are assuming that because he was looking in Maddie's window, that means Maddie had to be the primary target, when it could mean she was just one of the primary targets. And Kaylee was also a primary target. He's just looping around the house in a different way to be able to access her window. And he does the same thing during the murders. Okay, so because he did that during the murders, if he was there like watching them as these final four students, Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, and Ethan, return to the house. At some point, Dylan, Bethany, Kaylee, and Maddie are upstairs in Kaylee's room. This is where it's like, would he have known that Dylan and Bethany were there? Was he outside when Maddie left Kaylee's room and went to take the dog out? And is that why the dog ran off on Maddie? Now Maddie's downstairs asking Bethany, do you know where the dog went? Did the dog chase him off at that time? So then it appears he's in the probable cause affidavit that he's just returning to his campus from we don't know where at 2:42 a.m. Is that because the dog just chased him off from in the backyard? If so, then putting this into context, 2:26 a.m., the dog is missing, and maybe that's why Kaylee and Maddie might be calling Jack to court until 2:52 a.m. because Jack's dog is missing. Now, if this person is out there watching and they see Maddie take the dog out, they see her at 3 times the legal fucking drunkenness. She's literally fucking tore up from the floor up. And they go directly into her room. She's literally the easiest target because you may have just watched her stumble outside into the darkness with the dog. And then in her drunkenness, when the dog runs off, she completely fucking loses it. Okay, so if I'm right about that, then around 2:53, the phone is out and he's on his way back. And if I'm right about the PCA thing, then he's back in time to be the guy at the dumpster. And if I'm right about him being the guy at the dumpster, then that footlap may have been the initial time that he intended to commit these murders. But the students are still awake in the house and they're moving around, according to Dylan and Bethany. So he gets back in his car and he drives around what I think would be his normal lap around this house. The prior's like almost 30 times. And he waits. And when the back of the house, which is where his primary target or 2 primary targets are, is dark, that's when he goes in. And he made it in without anyone noticing. And he kills Maddie and Kaylee literally almost without anyone noticing. So that's when Xana and Ethan unfortunately become a part of the situation. Problem with my logic is that, well, I don't know who the fuck Papa Roger was. But the cop said it wasn't fucking Bryan. Okay? So maybe there is a fucking accomplice. And if you're one of those people who's like, well, the cops were Papa Roger, are you fucking kidding me? Because Papa Roger just the fuck appeared. Just vanished. Vamoose. Okay? Gone. In the wind. And then reappeared in June of 2023. And that's when the cops started looking into who Papa Roger was, according to the documents. The cops are chasing themselves. So what is that, the rogue cop? Is it the leak then? Is Papa Roger the leak then? Because then that would explain it, and I swear to God, I would not even have any more questions. So somebody tell me something. And is that why they didn't tell us who Papa Roger was? Is because they are doing an investigation into the leak, and they believe the leaks have been happening since Papa Roger popped out? Anyway, that's just me being me, doing me. I'll be back to talk about Spencer and Monique Tepe. Furthermore, we are going to add a public playlist. It will be something along the lines of, This Ain't That New York. So, there will be other places when I travel to other places. But I travel around upstate New York a lot. And there are some beautiful places to look at. So I would like to start a playlist showing you guys what upstate New York looks like, what central New York looks like, what the southern tier of New York looks like, what the areas that are not New York City look like. So this ain't that New York. Look out for it. As always, thank you for watching, and keep your eye out for my coverage of the murders of Monique and Spencer Tepe.